New York City was just beginning to wake up. But inside the bright studio of Good Morning America, everything was already in motion. Cameras glided across the polished floor. Producers whispered into headsets. Stage managers counted down seconds with silent hand signals. It was supposed to be another smooth celebrity interview. Sitting across from the camera, veteran anchor George Stephanopoulos wore his signature calm smile. His voice carried the reassuring tone millions of viewers trusted every morning. And joining us today, he said warmly, actor, producer, and one of Hollywood's most dedicated performers, Mark Wahlberg. Applause filled the studio. Mark stepped in with confidence. Tailored suit, focused eyes. That disciplined posture he's known for. At first glance, everything looked effortless. The first few minutes went exactly as planned. They talked about his new film, the intense preparation, the 4 a.m. workouts, the transformation required for the role. Mark joked about discipline. The audience laughed. George nodded approvingly, but then came the shift. "Mark," George said, leaning forward slightly, "this project feels very personal. Some critics are saying it's part of your attempt to reshape how the public sees you. Is that fair?" The air changed instantly. Mark's smile tightened. "I think people like to create narratives," he replied evenly. George maintained his calm tone. "You've spoken before about wanting growth and redemption. Some feel there are still unanswered questions from your past." The studio seemed quieter now. Even the faint hum of equipment felt louder. Mark crossed his hands together. His jaw flexed. "I've addressed my past many times," he said. "I'm here to talk about the work." George didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack. But he didn't retreat either. Of course. But growth often means revisiting difficult chapters. Do you feel the public has fully accepted that change? There it was. The tension no longer subtle, no longer hidden. Mark leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "I've spent decades building something meaningful. I don't think it's fair to reduce that to old headlines." The room felt heavier. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged quick glances. This wasn't in the pre-interview notes. This wasn't casual anymore. It was becoming a confrontation. Live television has no pause button. George continued carefully. "To be clear, this isn't about reducing your accomplishments. It's about transparency. That's what viewers expect." Mark exhaled sharply. "Transparency?" he repeated. "I've been transparent." His voice was firmer now, less controlled. George held steady. "Some advocacy groups argue your apologies in the past didn't go far enough. What would you say to them today? That did it." Mark leaned forward abruptly. "I would say," he began, his tone rising, "that people who weren't there don't get to define my entire life." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. George remained composed. "No one is defining your entire life." "It feels like that," Mark shot back. "Every time I come on a show, it circles back." One of the producers gestured frantically from off-camera, signaling to move to a commercial break. But the director hesitated. This was raw, real, unscripted, and it was happening live. George tried to pivot. "Let's talk about the film's central theme." "No," Mark interrupted. "Let's finish this." The interruption echoed louder than intended. Mark reached up and adjusted his microphone sharply, the motion noticeable. His breathing had changed. He wasn't yelling, not yet, but the restraint was thinning. "I've worked 20 years to become better," he continued. "I've built businesses. I've raised a family. I've shown up, and somehow it's never enough." George's voice softened. "Growth is powerful, and people respect that, but accountability is part of growth too." The word accountability hung in the air like a spark near gasoline. Mark stood up. The chair slid back with a faint scrape that sounded enormous in the silent studio. "I'm not here to be put on trial," he said firmly. "No music, no cutaway, just silence." George looked up at him, calm but visibly aware of the moment's weight. "You're not on trial," George replied. "You're being asked questions." Mark hesitated. For a split second, it looked like he might walk off the set entirely. Cameras zoomed out slightly, capturing the full frame, the standing actor, the seated anchor, the stunned audience. After a long pause, Mark slowly sat back down. But the energy had shifted permanently. The rest of the interview continued technically. Questions were asked, answers were given, but the ease was gone. Every word carried tension. Millions watching at home knew something extraordinary had just happened. And we're clear. The red light turned off. Silence replaced performance. Mark removed his microphone immediately, handing it to a crew member without a word. That wasn't necessary, he said quietly but firmly, looking toward George. George stood as well. It's part of the job. So is respect, Mark replied. Producers stepped in cautiously, voices low, diplomatic. We didn't mean for it to escalate, one of them said. Mark shook his head. It escalated because it always goes there. He wasn't shouting now. The intensity had cooled into something, sharper, frustration layered over fatigue. I came here to talk about the film, he added. That's what we agreed on. George adjusted his jacket. We covered the film. We also covered what viewers care about. For a brief second, they locked eyes. Not enemies, not friends. Two professionals who had collided under the pressure of live television. Mark's team signaled it was time to leave. He gave a short nod and walked toward the backstage hallway. The studio slowly resumed movement. Crew members exhaled. Phones buzzed. Clips were already circulating online. Within minutes, social media exploded. Mark Wahlberg loses it live. Tense showdown on morning TV. Was George too aggressive? Commentators dissected every facial expression, every pause, every raised tone. But inside that studio, the moment felt more complicated than the headline suggested. It wasn't just anger. It was the clash between image and inquiry, between reinvention and reminder, between celebrity and journalism. Later that day, both camps released measured statements, professional, controlled, predictable. But the live moment couldn't be edited. It couldn't be rewritten. That's the power and danger of live television. The cameras capture everything. The tension, the vulnerability, the pride, the pressure. By evening, the clip had millions of views. By the next morning, it had become part of pop culture conversation. But one question lingered. Did Mark Wahlberg truly lose control? Or was it simply the cost of defending? A life rebuilt under a spotlight. That never turns off? The cameras may have stopped rolling, but the debate had only just begun.